Welcome back everyone to Jit Geek, and welcome to our House of the Dragon season finale episode breakdown, discussion, review. And this is the final one of the season. It's been a blast. It was a good episode. It wasn't spectacular, but it was a good episode, and I guess it was a good solid finish to the season one of House of the Dragon. I was about to say it's been a roller coaster, but it actually hasn't. It's been surprisingly overwhelming. It's been surprisingly good. Coming off the back of Game of Thrones season 7 and 8, I was very surprised that they could make a show of this quality and sticking so close to the books. We've brought back the family tree for this episode review. We're going to discuss the main plot points. Not much went on in the season finale, but there are some plot points that will extend into season 2, and we've had confirmation from HBO that there will be a season 2. I think we'll mix it up a bit for the season finale. I've noted down a couple of good things, a couple of bad things, and a couple of changes that we've seen from the books. So we can go through those, and then depending on how long we're going with the review, we'll crack on and do our usual run through of the episode just to make sure we've picked up any of the loose ends, the details, and the extra nuggets of information that we haven't missed from the main review. So before we start, if you're enjoying the content, feel free to give us a like, drop a comment down below in the chat. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content, and stay tuned for more. Hit the notification bell if you never want to miss an update. But with all that out of the way, I think it's just best to get on with the season finale review. Now, episode 10, like I said, it was a good episode, solid episode. We've had, I would say we've had a good handful though that have been a lot better than this in this season. I've got an idea to do a complete season review, and probably breaking down the book versus the season as well, but also looking at what was good, what was bad, and what the key changes were from the books. What you've got to bear in mind though with the books, and not to spoil that video, is the Fire and Blood book is written from multiple different perspectives. So there is a jester at court who's one perspective. There is a maester, and I think at times there are other perspectives woven into the story as well. So what House of the Dragon we've seen here all throughout the season is that it's that real definitive view about actually what went on, because at certain times in the season we've seen scenarios, we've seen dialogue, we've seen character interactions that no one from the book perspectives would have seen. Things like the Viserys and the Alicent interactions we saw in the previous episode. Things like the Viserys and Rhaenyra interactions we've seen throughout the whole of the season. Most importantly, the prophecy stuff. None of that was really big in the books, but because it was a Viserys and a Rhaenyra thing only, I can see how they've accommodated that in the show. Now, don't get me wrong, this wasn't a bad episode. I thought it was arguably better than episode 9. And whilst we'll get onto it when we do when we go through the good, the bad, and the changes later of the episode, it didn't feel like a season finale. It didn't really have that wrap up feeling. It set up a couple of plot points, and I guess the main overarching war for the war for the crown, I guess. But it did set up the Dance of the Dragons moving into season 2. That's all pretty much it set up, and but it didn't feel like a season finale. It felt, to be honest, like an episode that was midway through a season, or it felt like a two-parter. And I imagine season 2, episode 1 will be the second part to this episode, the aftermath, and building on the tensions, building on the aftermath of what we've saw at the back end of this episode. Now, jumping straight into the episode kind of breakdown, the exec summary here, the high level plot points here. We start off in Dragonstone. Now, this was a contrast from episode 9 that focused on on Alicent's crew, that focused on the Greens. This episode focused on the Blacks. This focused on Rhaenyra's team, Daemon, and the Dragonstone gang. We start off by getting the perspective of Rhaenyra and Daemon after hearing the news about Viserys and the death. There's a bunch of stuff that goes on Dragonstone. A lot of scenes that I actually didn't expect to happen in this episode. We had the miscarriage. We had it was the birth. I suppose it was the stillbirth. We had what was it now? It's even on the thumbnail. I've had to put it on the thumbnail. The painted table, and the planning for the war. We've had the bridge scene with Otto. We had more planning for war with against the Greens. What else? We had the scene with Daemon and Rhaenyra with the oath, the Song of Ice and Fire piece, and the neck choke, which kind of threw me back a little bit. I didn't really expect Daemon to be going down that road with Rhaenyra, but that's kind of in his character. Equally, he was a bit pissed off that Rhaenyra knew about the prophecy, and Viserys had never told Daemon. Because to me that means Viserys never wanted or never intended for Daemon to be heir to the throne. What we've established from the books, from George Martin, and from the show is that it's only the heir that finds out about the prophecy. It's only the heir that finds out about Aegon's dream, and it's only the heir that is entrusted with all of this responsibility to carry on and potentially defeat the Cold, potentially defeat the White Walkers as we know them. So, look, I'm not justifying Daemon's actions here, but I can understand why he got frustrated. It's in his nature to act out like that, and the line that he dropped as well with Rhaenyra when he said it wasn't, it wasn't prophecy that gave us power, it was dragons that gave the Targaryens power, and how true that is, because as much as I love the prophecy stuff, it really doesn't come into fruition until the days of Game of Thrones, which is 200-ish years into the future. So Daemon's right in the sense that it's the dragons that give them power. It's not this prophecy. It's not this dream. That's the vision. I suppose that's the big vision, to bring the realm together, unite against the Cold, unite against the others. The others, by the way, is the name for the White Walkers in the books. So that's kind of the grand vision. Equally, though, from a tactical perspective, it's the Game of Thrones, it's the war for the throne, it's the Dance of the Dragons that we'll likely see going into season 2. So I can see Daemon's perspective. I'm not justifying his actions though. So that scene wrapped up the main Dragonstone piece with Rhaenyra and Daemon. We then transitioned into the Corlys and the Rhaenys scene. Find that Corlys is now alive. He's brought up to speed with all of the actions, with all of the events that have happened in episodes gone by, and while he's been on the Stepstones, and while he's been ill. Rhaenys kind of casually says that his brother Vaemond was beheaded by Daemon, and he almost kind of shrugs it off as if he deserved it. That's how I felt watching that scene. There's no backlash about that, and it felt a bit off. I've got to admit, it did feel a bit off that there was no kind of backlash towards Daemon about that, the beheading. Equally, though, he did drop the line in Corlys where he said that, ambition has always been the kryptonite of the Velaryons, essentially. So he did kind of balance it out. Equally, though, I am finding a couple of scenes in the latter episodes that lack consequence, and I must admit that's what massively put me off from season 7 and 8 of Game of Thrones. The lack of consequence was unbelievably bad. It was apparent massively, and we're kind of starting to see it trickle in here and there. I'm not saying it's derailing the show. Equally, though, it's wise to call it out, because I hope it doesn't continue. Look, they haven't got much to go on in terms of the books, and they've done an absolutely incredible job so far with what they've adapted. But these little pieces, these little minute details do bug me, because we didn't have that in the Game of Thrones show seasons probably 1 to 5 even. It was only towards the back end. And we've got George on site with House of the Dragon, George Martin. So I'm shocked that he allows these kind of minute, slight, details to go amiss. Nonetheless, we had a bunch of stuff going on in Dragonstone. We had the Corlys and the Rhaenys scene, and that seemed like it was on Dragonstone as well. So loads of stuff happened on Dragonstone. We then had that great scene with Daemon and his lovely singing. Now the dragon, and I think we need to do a piece on the dragons after maybe in the upcoming weeks, because we've seen a bunch of dragons in this season. We've grown up with a few of them. We've seen a bunch of them from the early doors. We've been introduced to new dragons in terms of what the kids have had. Equally, we've been introduced to a few other names in this episode and a few other locations of dragons. Equally, the one that Daemon was singing to is a dragon called Vermithor. I hope I've got that name right, but I'm pretty sure it's Vermithor. Now, this dragon, Vermithor, is the second biggest dragon in the world of Westeros at the moment. The first being Aemond One-Eyed Dragon, Vhagar. But Vermithor is a cannibal, as noted in the books. So this is a dragon that likes the taste of other dragons. And it's an interesting choice, because not only is it absolutely ginormous, not only is it angry as hell, but it's one to take a bite out of other people's dragons. So that'll be interesting moving going into season 2. Will Daemon just set it free and set it loose? Will he, claim Vermithor as his own? I don't think he can in terms of the dragon rules. I think only one rider can be on one dragon at one time. So he's still on Caraxes, which is the redneck long boy. So we'll see what happens there going into season 2. Now, the episode finished with Rhaenyra giving Jace and Luke their kind of part to play in this episode, i.e., you both use your dragons, fly off to the respective houses throughout the Seven Kingdoms, and plead for support for Rhaenyra, essentially. What Rhaenyra thought is, because Storm's End is pretty much next door to King's Landing and to Dragonstone, is that Lucerys, Luke, wouldn't have an issue getting there. It just so happens that Aemond, arch nemesis, should we say, just so happens to have been on site in Storm's End at the time he's there as well. And if I was Luke, I would have been straight back on my dragon, having known Aemond was there, because you knew it was going to kick off, and you knew something was going to happen with the dragons. Now, one of the better parts of this episode was that dragon battle at the end, and that CGI, and we'll get onto that later in the kind of specific breakdown. But you can see the stark difference in size between Aemond's dragon Vhagar and Lucerys' dragon. I think it was Anax or Arax or something like that. I can never remember the name of their children's dragons. Hence why I think we need to do a bit of a breakdown and a deep dive into them, because the dragons have all had their own characteristics. I mean, Caraxes has arguably the standout for me, the redneck long boy. He's had that real iconic long red neck, the red scales. Rhaenyra's Syrax has kind of got that golden glow to it, and they're very distinct, and that's what I like about them. I mean, we've got Aemond with Vhagar now. That's very distinct in terms of its size and its presence. So Vermithor, another one we were introduced to this episode, is going to mimic, I imagine, by the looks of it, it's going to mimic Balerion the Black Dread, which was Aegon the Conqueror's dragon from the books and from the lore of this show. So it'll be interesting going into the next season about how many more dragons we get, because the numbers are mounting. Equally though, Lucerys didn't have a chance against Aemond's dragon. So he fought valiantly, however, he didn't have a chance. Now, like I said, it was a good finale. It was definitely a one-up from episode 9. It was definitely a good episode. It wasn't a banger, though. We've had some quality bangers of episodes. Most notably, and I was looking through my reviews earlier today, and if you want to go back and watch them, they're still on the channel. Most notably, I think episode 1 was a fantastic start to the season. Episode 5 with that cliffhanger and the green dress and the wedding, or the party, should I say. Episodes 7 and 8, I think, were really good as well, particularly episode 8. That was the standout for me, episode 8, and it's a shame, really, they killed off Viserys in episode 8, because he brought so much to the table. And I do want to pay homage to Paddy Considine. What a performance. And, he played that good of a performance. George R.R. Martin is looking to rewrite Fire and Blood in honour of Viserys' character and how Paddy Considine has portrayed him in this show. He's done that good of a job. George is thinking about going back and rewriting some of the Viserys parts of the book. I mean, I think that's fantastic, and it's just testament to how well Viserys has been portrayed in House of the Dragon. Now, look, the episode sets up a few things for season 2, but again, it really didn't feel like a finale. What I would say is, though, is there were a lot of good things that coming out of this episode. There were some bad, and there were some changes. Now, the good things I want to discuss is first the acting, not just in this episode, going back throughout the season, and not to kind of spoil the season review we'll be doing, but arguably the majority of this cast have been perfectly cast here. The majority of these actors and actresses, I guess, and this is going to be a bit controversial, the only one I'm still on the fence about is the newer version of Rhaenyra. I did, and I still do, prefer the younger version of Rhaenyra. I mean, the older version and the newer version of Alicent Hightower is perfectly cast. And they could have stuck with the younger version and not aged them up at all. Equally though, I think the new Alicent Hightower actress, Olivia Cook's done a fantastic job. Now, Emma Darcy, who plays Rhaenyra, the older version, we've got her on the screen here in the centre. Again, I'm still finding her very rigid and very very uptight, and she's not as aggressive, and she's not as, she hasn't got that fire in her belly like the young Rhaenyra did. That real Targaryen spirit. You can see that in Daemon, and you saw that at times with Viserys. You saw that pretty much in every single episode with the young Rhaenyra Targaryen, but this current Rhaenyra, I'm not convinced still. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the actors, the changes that they've made with the actors, particularly with Rhaenyra and Alicent. Who was your favourite? I'd love to know in the comments below. But look, the acting's outstanding. I mean, hats off to Paddy Considine, Viserys. Episode 8 was, his acting was flat out probably the best piece of this whole entire show so far. I thought everyone has played their part extremely well, and everyone is playing the part that well. It's forced me to compare them to the seasons gone by of Game of Thrones, particularly seasons 1 to 5. I mean, if we look at Otto, he's like that more Tywin, developing into that more Tywin Lannister role. Conversely, though, I think Daemon is someone we didn't see in Game of Thrones. He does remind me in the books of partly the earlier version of Jaime Lannister, partly Euron Greyjoy, because he wears his heart on his sleeve. Equally though, he's a sadistic mofo, and he just goes off and does his own thing. So that's where the Euron, in my eyes, comes in. But yeah, the acting, superb. What I would say in this particular episode, though, was the acting of the kids, Rhaenyra's children with Laenor. Their acting was really good. I thought Lucerys played a really good part, and Daemon played a really good part as well. Again, not too convinced with Rhaenyra, I've got to be honest, with the acting in this episode and throughout the latter half of the season. But that doesn't derail the show for me. That's just a nitpick and a preference, I think. I mean, watching it with my missus is sold on the new Rhaenyra and loves her. To be fair, loves all of the actors. So, it is just a preference for me. Equally, this episode's CGI and the dragons were unbelievable. They were the best that they have been all season, and you can tell that they've saved all of the cash for this episode. Caraxes, Redneck Longboy, he looked brilliant. He looked spot on. I think we had a few flashbacks, well, not flashbacks. I think we had a few. It was when Rhaenyra was going through the birthing scene. There was a few flashes to her dragon, so just showing that there's a link between the dragon and Rhaenyra. And even Syrax looked really good there. Who else did we see? Aemon's dragon, Vhagar, looked impressive. The size was impressive. It really was. There was a scene when they fly out of Dragonstone. I think it was Jacaerys Jace going to, where was he going first? He was going to the Vale, I think, or the Riverlands. There was Luke going off to Storm's End, and then the third dragon I've seen on online, like on Twitter and Facebook. Who was the third dragon? I do believe it was Rhaenys though, because she said she wanted to go out and help set up the barricades in the stepstones. So that was probably the only scene in this episode where the CGI wasn't on point. But where we saw the dragons up front and up close and personal, the CGI was on point. It was the best it's been all season. And I'm so glad it was, because that fight at the end, if the CGI was crap, it would have made the scene bad. But the fact that the CGI was really good made the scene that much better. So yeah, so the acting, the CGI and the dragons, particularly going back to that part with Damon and the singing, I mean, that's just tying the two together. His acting, the singing, and the CGI all in that scene with the whole fire, that just looked, it brought dragons to life for me in that scene, and it just made them, it made Vermithor look like a complete and utter tyrant. So I can't wait to see that dragon in season 2. And I'm pretty sure it's not, we'll be seeing a lot more of Vermithor, because it's probably the only dragon that can go up against Aemon's Vhagar dragon, considering the size difference. I thought the other positive coming out of this episode was the world building and the name drops. There was a few times where they dropped names of places that we've heard before, and you'll notice on the thumbnail I've got the painted table, so that's been set up. Who knew? Who could have told Stannis that all you had to do was put some candles underneath the painted table and it comes to life? It activates almost, and that looked just unreal. That looked brilliant. So I couldn't not put that in the thumbnail. Equally though, the world building that offered was great, and we went through the whole map essentially, probably apart from Dawn and north of Winterfell. At the same time, we were given some names of other places that we haven't heard before, and one in particular I want to touch on is House Celtigar, which is actually the third Valerian household that the show doesn't talk about. Now, what we hear from Corlys and the Targaryens is House Valerian and House Targaryen were the only surviving Valerian households. Well, technically that's not true, because when the Doom happened in Valyria, there was a third household in Valyria called the Celtigars. Now, it seems like they've escaped and I've ended up in Westeros somehow. So it's a nice little nod to the book readers that about House Celtigar. And yeah, I mean, we've got the other names there that we've heard before. Baratheons, the Arryns, the Starks. And it gets me excited for the latter seasons, because hopefully we get to see more of other houses, and hopefully we get to see others other than the Hightowers, the Valerians and the Targaryens. I'm not saying it's the limited cast has been like a failing of this season. It's been really good, and I like the kind of close knit community of cast that we've had over the course of this season. But it would be good to go real Game of Thrones next season at least, and expand the cast and expand the world. And it's probably one of the shortfalls I've had from this season, to be fair. Although I have liked the cast that we've had, it would have been nice to see more of the world. Final point though on the world building is about some of the other lineages, where we had Rhaenyra talk about Rhaenys being a descendant of the Baratheons, so her mother was a Baratheon, and Emma Arryn, she was an Arryn. before she married Viserys. So I do like that when and that's a George Martin thing. That's got to be where they're bringing in the kind of the backstory, they're bringing in the histories, they're bringing in the lore a lot more, and you can see that's a real George Martin thing. And I'm so glad he's on board, and I just hope he stays on board for seasons 2, 3, 4, however many they're doing, because without George, we've seen in Game of Thrones season 7 and 8, it goes to pot. It just doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And I think as long as George is as long as George is on board, we won't have an issue going into the next few seasons. Now, he's come out, George Martin, and he said this is going to need 4 seasons. And 4 seasons of 10 episodes is probably plentiful to go through the Dance of the Dragons storyline. Considering they haven't got that much material to work from in the books, it's going to be a push even so. What I would say is, though, and having read the books, not giving away any spoilers here, what we've seen in season 1 is a drop in the ocean and is only scratching the surface. So, however long it is until season 2, I can't wait. There'll be plenty more House of the Dragon content to come. I've got loads of ideas in the off season. Let me know in the comments below what you want to see, though. If you've got any ideas that you want me to do in terms of videos and content. But I've got some videos coming your way this month and the rest of this year, and going into the off season next year as well. Now, the good news is they have started planning for season 2. They've had the green light for season 2. They've also, I think they've confirmed that it will begin filming in March in 2023. So that's really good news. Now, there is this talk about all these other offshoots, and there's a Corlys Velaryon offshoot development series in the works or whatever. In fairness, not interested. Not interested in a Jon Snow series, not interested in a Daenerys series, not interested in a Corlys Velaryon series, not interested in Nymeria and the 10,000 Ship series. For me, the only thing that would interest me is more House of the Dragon, because this has been absolutely incredible, or a Game of Thrones reboot from the end of season 6. I know, having watched some Dick Van Doomkop videos, that that Discovery, who have recently took over Warner Brothers, who actually own HBO, who own the rights to the Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon materials. David Zaslav, he kind of runs the show there, Discovery Warner. I've heard that he's basically flooding the market with different Game of Thrones ideas to see which one sticks. And one of the ideas on the table is a Game of Thrones reboot. Now, whether that's from season 1, I don't think it should be. I think they should go from season 6. Season 6 was probably the last decent episodes that we got. But what they have the opportunity to do, though, is fix all the mistakes that they made in 7 and 8, follow the books, ensure that George is on board, ensure that George bloody writes The Winds of Winter, gives them the outline for Dream of Spring, and introduce the new the characters that they missed in the back end of Game of Thrones, like Lady Stoneheart, like the real Euron Greyjoy that we didn't get to see, like young Griff, aka Fagon, aka Aegon, potentially. And dive into the prophecy stuff, because that just went out the window towards the season 8, and the Night King was dispatched in one episode, which is a complete farce in my eyes. And the end boss ends up being Cersei and, some dodgy Euron Greyjoy that we never wanted. So it all fell apart, and I think they've got the opportunity to reboot it. Maybe they do it after House of the Dragon and after the Dance of the Dragons. Maybe they do something and coincide with this and the Game of Thrones reboot, potentially. Personally, I think that's the only one that will stick, and I think that's the only one that will cause enough uproar to warrant, a green light. Now, I've heard that the Jon Snow series has been greenlit, at least for a pilot episode. I really don't think that's going to be much good, though. Where do you take his character? The only thing to do would be to badge it as a Jon Snow series, but maybe bring in Daenerys, maybe bring in Sansa, maybe bring in Bran with the whole old gods, etc. But yeah, so that's looking at what's to come next. In terms of what was bad about this episode, though, there was a few things that stuck out to me. Now I'm just going to recap on the notes. Like I said at the start, this didn't feel like a season finale. It didn't have that wow factor. It didn't have that that real conundrum and that real exciting conclusion that we've seen time and time again. I mean, season 1 Game of Thrones ended with Daenerys's. It ended with the funeral. It ended with the dragons being born, and that was incredible. We've had other. I mean, I could probably go back and review them all at some point, but some of the episode 10s have been arguably as good as the episode 9s, and we all know what episode 9s were. So yeah, it felt like half an episode. It felt like this was a 2-parter, and I kind of got to the end of the episode and I was like, really, is that it? Is that all you've got for the finale? Because considering we've had some absolute bangers of episodes, this fell short for me, again, compared to the other episodes of the season. So hopefully they fix that in season 2. Now, having read the books, I know what happens long term. I don't know how they're going to divvy that up, though, and I don't know how they're going to compartmentalise that, and I don't know what they're going to focus on in season 2 yet. We've had no indication of that, so it'll be interesting to see what they use from the books in season 2, because it's almost finished quite open-ended. Yes, Rhaenyra is now mad that one of her children have died at the hands of Aemond, and we'll get onto that as one of the other, issues in this episode. And yes, that has now started technically the Dance of the Dragons war, the Greens versus the Blacks, full on. Equally though, that's pretty much all it has started. The rest of it is open game, really, and they can go a lot of different ways going into season 2. So one point before we get onto the end scene is the bridge scene. The scene on the bridge I was a bit disappointed with. Now, whilst the dragons and the CGI looked fantastic, and whilst Otto Hightower delivered some absolute bangers in terms of some dialogue, I did think it felt a bit, and what have I put in here in my notes? It felt a bit empty, it felt like false action, like all that build up just for Rhaenyra to go, no, you'll find my answer on the morrow. It felt like a massive build up for absolutely zero payoff. And I was very disappointed with that scene. I expected from the trailer there to be a massive sword fight on the bridge, loads of deaths. You know, Damon showing us that sword fighting skill that he's got. Kristen Cole getting involved as well, because yes, he was on the bridge. Maybe even Otto Hightower getting involved with some sword fighting as well. So I did feel like that was a bit of a letdown scene. But again, that's just a nitpick for me. You know, others could find that scene was pretty good for them, but for me, yeah, I wasn't too convinced with that scene. Now, the biggest gripe I've got against this episode is not the fact that is about the last scene, and not the Rhaenyra one. Sorry, with the head turn. Was the dragon battle, because in the books, and having knowing about the books, Aemond has a clear motive to want to take Lucerys down on his dragon. In this episode, it is clear that they are trying to establish Aemond as having done that on accident, and for me that just doesn't cut it. That change in the books is a fundamental flaw, is a mistake that they've made there, because if they play on that going into season 2, well, it's a bit of a cop-out in my eyes. And equally, what I liked about the books was Aemond wanted to get back at Lucerys. Aemond wants to get back at Luke for taking his eye, essentially. And, you know, he even could have had that motive in this episode. I would have preferred that if Aemond would have just gone out, got his dragon, and used the dragon to kill Lucerys and cut him in half or eat him or whatever the Vhagar did. So the fact that they've changed it from the books has not only made it a bit of a cop-out, it's changed the motivation towards Aemond, and equally it could have implications going into season 2, because Rhaenyra could see this as an act of war and an act on purpose against Luke. Equally though, Aemond is like, well, hang on a minute, I did this on accident. I asked my dragon not to do this, but it didn't control, I was unable to control it. It almost feels like it was, a bloody Pokemon that didn't, that's too high level to take orders from its trainer. If that's what it felt like here. So for me, that change shouldn't have happened. They should have stuck to what happened in the books. They should have stuck to Aemond's motivations to want to kill Lucerys, because all the signs were there and all the signs were pointing to him actually doing that. So that was the bad pieces. We had the fact that it didn't feel like a finale, and that didn't really sit well with me towards the at the end of the episode. We had the bridge scene, and that kind of it was all a bit for nothing really. And then we had the changes in the book towards the end and Aemond's motivation. Now again, not massive. Equally though, there were some flaws in my eyes for what we saw in, compared with other episodes. Other episodes were like spot on. You can't really fault them. This one, it did have a few here and there. And equally, in episode 9 as well, the last couple of episodes have slipped in quality, I must admit. Quality in terms of the story, not quality in terms of the acting. Especially not quality in terms of the CGI and the dragons in episode 10. And in terms of that whole, the George R. R. Martin spin, or the George R. R. Martin lens that is on this show, has been through and through each and every episode. Looking at other changes I would make to this episode, I think there could have been some more sword and shield. There could have been some more fighting. we could have had more of a dance of the dragons almost, and not just on Dragonback, but dancing with swords. You know, that whole, I'm sure someone mentioned it in one of the episodes in this show this season. Dancing is like, you're not just on the dance floor, you're playing with sword and shield as well. So I would like to have seen more sword fighting in this episode, and the trailer half promised that with the scene on the bridge. That's where I thought we were going to get it. Let's have another think. It would have been nice to see Jace Jacaerys's point of view from and visiting Winterfell, visiting the Arryn maybe. One of the two. That would have been the icing on the cake for me for this episode. It would have kind of wrapped up their storyline quite well and seen their tasks almost, because that, Rhaenyra had essentially given them tasks to do, wrap them up, because we're going to have to wait till season 2 now to see Jacaerys going to the Vale of Arryn and to Winterfell. So I thought that was a bit lackluster that we didn't get to see that part. Another thing I would have liked to have seen is more interaction with Daemon and Vermithor. Either Daemon on Dragonback on Vermithor, or releasing Vermithor and seeing what that dragon was all about. Because yes, it looked impressive. Yes, it looked like it's an absolute mad tyrant of a dragon. But it would have been great to see its scale in terms of size. It would have been great to have seen it, burn a goat like we seen earlier in the show, or take on another dragon. So yeah, those were a couple of changes. I did have another one down as well. Let's just have a quick look at my notes here. Maybe some more prophecy stuff as well, and how that kind of wraps up more. I know it's arguably been the trigger for Alicent to go ahead and put Aegon on the throne, and it's Rhaenyra's trigger for, again, being on the throne, bringing the realm together. But maybe some more stuff, looking in scrolls and doing a bit more of a deep dive into the prophecy. This is probably more of a perspective, a selfish change I would have liked to have made to this episode. But to have introduced it and made a big song and dance about it at the start of this season, it's almost been parked and pushed to the side as being not that important, where, in all fairness, it is the grand idea of the whole book series and show in its entirety, really. It's as important as the squabbles of the Dance of the Dragons and the squabbles of the Game of Thrones. It is ultimately for me anyway, and having read the books, it is the main plot point of the books and arguably of the show. Maybe they can't make it as big as they want to because they can't deliver us White Walkers in this show, I guess. And that's probably why they haven't laid it on as thick as they could have. I have enjoyed the prophecy stuff. I was just a bit disappointed that we didn't get to see more of it in this episode, and it made more of a prolific part of the prolific part of Rhaenyra's story in this episode specifically. I do like though that they've given it a lens, an Alicent lens now, and a Rhaenyra lens, because it'll be interesting to see what happens in season 2, whether Alicent finds out about the Song of Ice and Fire piece, about Aegon's dream, about the prophecy stuff, because at the moment she just thinks it was Viserys waffling on about Aegon, albeit the son. She thinks it's the son, where in fact it's actually he was talking about Aegon the Conqueror. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in season 2. But yeah, I mean, to wrap things up, I think the episode was good. It was a good finale, as I've got in the just checking the live chat's working. Yeah, as I've got in the title. Wasn't perfect. Wasn't as good as episode 8. Was an improvement though from episode 9. I thought episode 9, like I said in my review, they had the B team on board. This one, I think they've gone back to some of the strengths, and I think they've ended strong enough. I don't think it was, episode 10 hasn't wowed me, but they've ended strong enough, and it's completed. The arc of season 1 is completed and on a very positive note, on a very Game of Thrones note, and it feels once again like Game of Thrones. It's got the dragons, it's got the prophecy, albeit it's lacking White Walkers, but I think the prophecy kind of slightly makes up for it. It's got the Game of Thrones, and you can already start to map, and maybe that's what we'll do in one of the videos, map Game of Thrones characters to House of the Dragon characters. So you can see the differences, but you can also see the similarities. Now, I think we're nearly an hour in. I don't think we need to make this a long one. I think what we'll do is, though, we will run through the let's just order these. We'll run through the episode as we usually do, just to see if we can get any just to see if we can pick up any little details that we've missed. And then I think we'll wrap things up for episode 10 finale review discussion. If you're joining us in the chat, thanks for joining us. Hope you're enjoying the content. Feel free to give us a like and comment below, or subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this and our Final Fantasy X gameplay that we're doing at the moment. I know Sphere Grid run through. Plenty more of that to come as well. And as I've said, plenty more House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones content to come in the off season as well. So don't go anywhere, and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss an upload. So let's just run through as we have done for each and every one of our episodes. Let's just make sure we're okay. Yeah. Now, I think one thing I haven't laid on thick, which I think I need to, is the painted table. It looked absolutely incredible. Impressive it was. I mean, it was impressive enough without the candles underneath. And when they start lighting it up, I thought that was really good. One part I am going to avoid in talking about is about the episode being a bit too much about Rhaenyra. What I loved about Game of Thrones is there wasn't... You could argue Daenerys, Tyrion and Jon were the main characters, but there really wasn't one main character. Now, since Viserys has died, everyone has pretty much fallen in place under either Alicent or Rhaenyra. And don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against that, but they've fallen in line a bit too much for my liking. There's like two factions, whereas at the start of the season, it was all very much even Steven. Everyone was on their own wavelength. Everyone was, no one was attesting to anyone, pretty much apart from Viserys, but no one, even listened to him. Everyone seems to have either fallen into one or two camps, and I know that's the whole premise of the Greens versus the Blacks, but it's too divided for me. Daemon isn't doing as much of his own thing nowadays. He's kind of diluted. Otto, he's all kind of yes, Alicent, no Alicent, 3 bags full. So I'm hoping that they branch out their storylines and it's not so regimented going into season 2 as well. Right, let's just run through. So we had the part with Lucerys talking about he's not going to be the heir to Driftmark. Well, now having watched that episode, we know he's not going to be the heir to the Driftwood crown or Driftmark because he's dead and he's probably in the belly of Vhagar right about now. You can see the motherly love for him though that she had. So we move on to the part where they find out about Viserys' death, and the pregnancy comes on quite strong and quite fast. And I thought Rhaenyra, I was worried about what her justification was to not burning the Greens, and come to think of it, it seems quite contradictory now because, and I didn't like that scene in episode 9. I thought it was too much, too much for show. I didn't think it was necessary. And one point, and we'll probably get onto it shortly, is when Rhaenys and Corlys are talking. In fact, we'll try and see if we can run. So this part, your brother's dead, he got his head sliced off, heedless ambition's always been a weakness. So this is the part, we shall declare for no one. Now, why I thought Rhaenys didn't burn the Greens in the previous episode is because she didn't side for no one and she didn't want to side for no one. Having first done that and not sided with the Greens, I agree with her justification to warn Rhaenyra because they are blood. Equally though, Corlys now saying we shall declare for no one, yet 5 minutes later they are declaring for Rhaenyra, and not much has really changed from this scene to the next scene. I wasn't convinced as to why he changed his tune so quickly. Now, having declared for Rhaenyra, that means Rhaenys has declared for Rhaenyra as well, so she's changed her tune pretty quickly, and through that logic and through that justification, she should have burnt the Greens alive. So that's probably another thing I didn't like about this episode. And episode 9, she should have just popped through the ground and flown straight off. None of that barking at the Greens that she did with the dragon. Anyway, I have to get a better way to figure out how to watch the episodes as well next season. So they find out about Viserys, and Rhaenys talks about how the Greens are coming. And how they've crowned Aegon in front of all the masses. I thought that was a good part. I thought this was good when they were around the painted table and Daemon showing his kind of war experience here, but still getting good counsel. Thought that was a bit of a random scene with them sword fighting on the beach, and that prompted me when when they were fighting, I thought he was going to have a sword fight, Lucerys, with Aemond towards the, when they were in the Baratheon throne room. Again, probably another disappointment, if I'm honest, about the. I thought this was a bit of like foreshadowing for that scene to happen with Aemond and have a bit of a sword fight. Anyway, we have the birthing scene, and whilst giving or trying to give birth, or about to give birth, she mentions about. She not only mentions that Aegon is crowned king, but she also mentions that. Just checking the sounds okay on the stream. She mentioned about Aegon's crowned king, and she also mentions that if she's to die in labour, then it all goes to Jacaerys. So, killing two birds with one stone there. I thought that was nicely said. And then they get them all planning for the war because the Greens are coming. This was an interesting scene about Daemon showing Jace about loyalty and respect, and where all that comes from is via dragon power. I mean, look at that. That's just... The CGI in this episode was impressive. Very, very impressive. Very realistic. That has got to be one of my favourite shots. Let's try and get that without the... That is one of my favourite shots of this entire season. Right there. Love that. That's going to be a thumbnail on one of my videos on the off season. So swear an oath to Rhaenyra or suffer the consequences via Redneck Longboy. Now that's just showing Jace how it's done really and how to utilise dragons, and I think that's what Daemon knows more than anyone really, is the power of dragons and how to use them to his advantage. Very gruesome scene when she pulls the baby out of her, but a very sad scene because it's a stillbirth, which is a shame. And I thought that was a very subtle scene between her and... Is that the one where Daemon's in the... Oh, and then Daemon's in the kind of... He's like here. If I don't want to get copyrighted, but... Oh, there he is. So he's actually watching Rhaenyra at that point. So that was very subtly done to show that Daemon knows about the birth and what Rhaenyra's just had to go through. So they have the funeral, and I thought that was it was quite a nice funeral, to be fair. Now, yes, it was a nice funeral. Yes, there's probably a nitpick. Considering the Greens are only like, an hour or two away on a boat ride from King's Landing to Dragonstone, they've got time to set up a funeral. Yeah, maybe. Maybe I'm just being too nitpicky now. But then you've got, is it Eric or Arik? I can't remember. He's on the family tree anyway. We can scroll back and have a look there. He presents Rhaenyra with the crown. And that then signals the start of her reign, I guess. Let's just see it. That just signals the start of her reign. Now this is the second part of them planning the war. Just going to motor through this because I know we've covered this. Nice shot of the painted table there. I love the fact that they've got the candles underneath as well. I thought that was really good. And this is the part where I mentioned about the world building. They go through the different towns and cities, build the world, talk about the different families that we know, talk about the different families that we didn't know, like the Celtigars. And there's a couple of others in there that I forgot. Oh, and they're also talking about the unclaimed dragons, Vermithor being one of them there on the Dragon Mount. I'm guessing that is the mountains where Caraxes had the dragon eggs, or laid the dragon eggs last time. I'm guessing that's kind of in those mountains on Dragonstone. But they've clearly established that the Blacks Team Rhaenyra has more dragons. Yes, Nath. Yes, Nath. Thanks for the comment, pal. Glad you're enjoying the stream, man. Shout out to Nath Mobile. Just a bit of an inside joke there, folks. But yeah, shout out to Nath Mobile on the stream. Big up to the boys as well. Got to shout out the boys in the episode 10 review. So yeah, so we've got Rhaenyra there doing a bit of dragon accounting and making sure that we know that that Team Black has a lot more dragons than Team Green certainly does. So they'll be counting on their wits and their strategy and their politics going into season 2, I think. Again, another amazing shot of the painted table there. I mean, it looks so much better than what Stannis had in Game of Thrones, doesn't it? So I'm really glad that they've kind of emphasised the painted table, because it is a big part of the books as well. Thanks, Nate. Keep up the work. Thanks, man. No, I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Glad you're joining us in the chat. Glad you're joining us on stream for the live review, and hope you're enjoying the content, man. So yeah, really pleased that that they're making a big thing and that they've really emphasised the painted table, because it's a big thing. It's like, you know, it's something that Aegon the Conqueror had put together, and it's just, you know, on Dragonstone, that was kind of his first kingdom when he came to Westeros. Now, this is the scene that I was very disappointed with, because it kind of came and went, and I thought they could have done a whole lot more with this scene, and they could have made it less about Rhaenyra, less about Rhaenyra, and more about getting some bloody fighting done, some actual battling and some war, and give us what we really want. And yeah, I just thought it was a bit disappointing, and I wasn't too impressed with it. It just seems like a lot of build-up for not much payoff. Especially when he drew his sword and thought, here we go, boys. Here we go. But no, we didn't get any of that. That's probably what it lacked towards the back end of this season, is good sword and shield fighting. So we get part 2 of the War Council and preparing for war with the Greens. And then we get this real strange scene with Daemon and Rhaenyra about the prophecy. And it's clear, and I've got it in my notes here, it's clear that, and as I said earlier in the review, it's clear that Viserys never told Daemon about A Song of Ice and Fire. He never told him about the prophecy. And it's clear that he never intended him to be heir to the throne. He always intended for one of his children to be heir. So that's why he doesn't know. That's why he's a bit pissed off. And that's why he thrashes out to... excuse me. That's why he thrashes out to Rhaenyra. And yeah, it's a very troubling scene, but, you know, he's got it in him. We've seen glimpses of that all throughout this season, of him being a bit of a nasty boy. So, yes, Nath, Jit Geek all the way. Glad you're enjoying the Jit Geek content, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us in the chat. Drop a like if you're liking the video, and make sure you drop in a like when this goes out as a regular video as well, because I'll be unlisting the live stream at the end of the stream as well, and then I'll put up a fresh video for you as well. Just better traction, I think, on the video versus the live stream. Now, yeah, don't want to spend too much time on this scene because it is evident why he got pissed off. Again, not condoning his actions. Equally, though, it is of Damon's character to thrash out like this and get annoyed. Now, on a repeat review, a repeat watch of this episode, I thought Rhaenyra started laughing at him for trying to choke her out, 2, for Viserys not telling him, and 3, for Viserys telling her, and she's almost got one up on Daemon on this prophecy stuff. So I don't know whether it was a bit of shock or whether she was actually part laughing here. That's what I gathered from it anyway. But he's clearly really annoyed, but almost defends his. Now where's the line? Almost defends his family and what the Targaryens are all about, because he says dragons didn't make prophecy basically, and words didn't make, and vision didn't make us kings, the dragons did. Right, so we've covered this scene. Let's see if we can fast forward. So this is Corlys joining the part 3 of the War Council, declaring, after saying he's not going to declare for anyone, so declaring for Rhaenyra. And this is where Rhaenyra sets the agenda. She's got to unite the realm. She's got to keep the peace. Equally, though, she's got to defend the realm against the enemies, and I guess her enemy is Alicent and the Greens. And anyone that wants to side with Alicent and the Greens. So yeah, this is just setting the tasks in motion. And I thought it was odd that she got them to swear by the faith of the Seven, because I don't think the Targaryens do worship the faith of the Seven. I always thought that they worship their own gods, so I thought this was a bit of a weird scene as well. Anyway, Rhaenyra sets them the tasks, thinking, Lucerys is going to be fine. No issue, he's only going up the road. So we have 1, 2, and 3. So I'm guessing 1 was Jacaerys, 1 was Lucerys, and 1 was Rhaenys. But yeah, I mean, look at that. The CGI was very impressive. Even there was a couple of shots here where it wasn't too good, but when we get the close-up shots of the dragons, they look bloody brilliant. This is my favourite scene in the episode with Vermithor. Let's try and see if we can get a good shot. Hang on. I want to see the shot of him with the fire. Oh, look at that. Yes. Yes, Verms. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen more of what he looks like, just to make sure that we can establish him as distinctly as we can the rest of the dragons. We'll see more of Vermithor, though, going into season 2. Now we're coming up to basically the end part of this episode, and so yeah, that's the whole. Aemon's already got there first. He's proposed to Boris Baratheon, who we've got on the timeline, by the family tree, by the way, that if you swear to Alicent and Aegon, there'll be a good marriage proposal in there for you. Whereas Rhaenyra had basically said, remember your oath, mate, because you made that when the king was alive. Now I'm the queen, cough up. Make sure you're adhering to what you'd promised Viserys and me back in the day. And then we all know what happens next, which is Lucerys thinks he's got away. I mean, the dragon fight was really good and the CGI was really good. And where's that shot? I want to find that shot of Lucerys. No, it's there. I just want to find it because it looks insanely good. I think it's this point where there's the outline of there it is. Just don't want to get copyrighted. That's why I'm pausing. Oh, there it is. That's a brilliant shot, that is. Yeah, and you can just see the stark contrast in size between Vagar and Arax. I think that's the Lucerys' dragon's name. Who cares? He's dead now anyway, so we ain't going to need to talk about Lucerys' dragon anymore. Aemond actually looking like a badass still with his patch. I thought this was... I thought this part in the episode reminded me of the pod racing in The Phantom Menace, and I thought that they looked like they were on bloody pod racing. But I thought this was just a gorgeous scene. And let's see if we can get the kill shot. Oh, that is brilliant. What a way to finish. What a way to finish. Now look, that is mightily impressive. That is, I want to see that again. We're going to go through that again. So he ain't got a clue where he is, and then boom, gone. Gone in pieces. I mean, look at that. He's in about 50 different pieces. Now, like I said, the main thing that I didn't like about this scene is the motivation behind Aemond's actions, because in the books, he distinctively wanted to do that. In the episode, he doesn't. So that didn't sit well with me. Equally, end on, a very well acted scene. No dialogue, just great acting. And then we get the final shot from Rhaenyra going into season 2. And I think that wraps it up, folks. Thanks for joining us in the chat. Big shout out to Nath Mobile. Big shout out to the boys. Big shout out to everyone who's joined me for season 1 in the chat, in the comments. Whoever's liked, subscribe through the live streams. Thanks so much. We're building a great community here at Jit Geek, and plenty more to come. If you've enjoyed the review, if you've enjoyed the season-long reviews that we've done, feel free to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Drop us a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts about the season in its entirety. Watch out for more content to come on House of the Dragon. Watch out for more content to come on gaming and other stuff we've got coming up. Hit us up on social media. We've got Twitter. We've got the Instagram now started. And thanks again for joining. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.